Hey guys, how are you? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a thriller from the UK, English language, released in the year 2014, directed by Gabe Turner, and this film is called The Guvnors. So The Guvnors is about this main character. Back in his day, he used to be part of a group called the Guvnors. Now the Guvnors were very brutal, they were a gang that were very close-knit, and they were football hooligans, and they drank at this pub that was known as the hardest pub in London. But although they were criminals, they still had a set of morals. They still had a set of rules that they abided by in order to give themselves respect. And so they were brought up by this mentor who taught them from a very young age how to be disciplined, how to respect your others as well as respect yourselves. So these Guvnors have a lot to owe to this mentor, and when this main character leaves the Guvnors, it causes a little bit of a rift. So since then, since leaving the Guvnors, this guy has made a name for himself. He's gone clean, he has a beautiful house, he has a wife and a young son, and he has just a very, very high paying job. So he really wants to put his life on track for his son. But when he starts to see his old life becoming apparent in his son's behaviour, he starts to really doubt the fact that he can escape from his past. But this is going to be further complicated when his mentor of all those years ends up being murdered by some young thugs. Now these young thugs, they don't have any morals, they don't have any respect, and they're commanding everything with an iron fist, and everyone is terrified of these people. So this main character has to make the decision whether or not to go back to his old life in order to avenge the death of his mentor, or to keep his life and basically raise the son that raise his son in a way that he wanted to be raised but ultimately couldn't be. So the decision is going to be life-changing, and to prevent myself from giving away too much, if you want to know how the movie unfolds, please go out there and see it for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on The Guvnors. I actually thought this was a very intriguing revenge tale. Now the reason why I say it's very intriguing, and it is actually quite surprising, is because it does form a shadow of its own amongst a very tight subgenre. Now with revenge films, you've got the bad guys doing something horrible, and you get so much hatred to these bad guys that when the good guys exact their revenge, there's a strong level of satisfaction. You want to see these bad guys die in the most horrible way possible. And so a lot of films have just recycled that tired old formula to the point where if you see one, you've seen them all. But The Guvnors actually starts off in a very stereotypical manner, very generic manner, and you think you know where this film is going, but by the halfway stage it turns itself on its head, and it really goes down a very thought-provoking track. And I thought that the movie was a lot more richer than I thought it would be. I thought the movie does show you vengeance for what it is, very complicated, very messy, and although you're avenging someone that has lost their life, it doesn't necessarily mean that things are going to be better. At the end of the day, this guy was still dead, and no matter how much pain and torture that this main character was contemplating, would it change his life or would it make his life even worse? And ultimately the destruction of revenge is portrayed very well in this film. It's very respectful, and it makes you think about how you would react in a certain situation and how a domino effect it can be. And so I really liked that, and it was, as I said, it was very surprising because it's not until the halfway stage where the film really gets going, and that is ultimately a problem, because I thought the first half of the film just felt like it was a little bit of a filler, and it felt like the twist, there is a little bit of a twist, and that's when it starts taking a deep turn. But I thought that it actually took a little bit too long to get to that point. And so a lot of people are going to be put off by that. So the actual first half, as I said, you've got this villain who's done a terrible thing to this man who's very well respected. You've got a group of people who are coming back together. The Guvnors, there's a little bit of animosity between the Guvnors. There's a side story that I actually thought gave a little bit of complexity to these people. And so they get together, and they're going for a quest of revenge. And then so the first half of the film, it just felt like it was going through, it was by the numbers, it was just meandering along. But then, as I said, usually in a film the second half ruins a movie, but this second half really builds it to a point where you feel as though, okay, I've watched a film that I'm glad I watched, but it was definitely a surprising ordeal because the first half was actually quite pedestrian. So the movie is about, as I said, revenge and how complicated that can be, and it's also a movie about making decisions and how one decision in your life can have a tsunami effect. Basically, a domino effect where everyone is involved and it's just a complete mess, and that how sometimes you can't run away from your demons, that you can try to run but you can't hide, and that'll always catch up to you in the end. And so I thought the main character was very interesting, but unfortunately for the main character, I thought his acting could have been a little bit better. He was a very cold-hearted person. You could feel that he had compassion within him, you could feel that he was decent, but the acting performance from this main character wasn't as didn't have as much of a variation as I really wanted it to, because it actually felt like he just had one expression on his face throughout the entire film. So a little bit of a better performance within the central character could have made it a little bit more impactful. But having said that, he doesn't do a terrible job. I thought he was very menacing, but at the same time very respectful. And it's also a movie about showing you the gangsters of yesteryear versus the gangsters of today, and the fact that today's youth don't have consequences for their actions, and therefore they're more brazen. They feel they can get away with anything. But then in the older days, these criminals, they actually respected the consequences. Yes, they were doing bad things, but they still had morals, they still had self-respect, and you felt that yes, these guys are villains, but they're guys that you could have a drink with. They're guys that you could talk to. Whereas today's youth, today's gangsters are people that you don't want anything to do with. So it does show you very contrasting differences of two different worlds that are very very different from each other. And I thought that was a very interesting aspect of the movie as well. So the movie is very reminiscent of another movie called We Still Kill the Old Way, which was a very ordinary film. I just thought that got lost in torture porn, and this movie could have got lost in torture porn, but I was so happy to see that it does avoid the torture porn. It actually is a movie, as I said, about environments and about the way we're raised. We're a product of how we're raised and the environment that we're in. It's a movie, as I said, about revenge, and there's no satisfaction because the complexity to the villain is what makes the film work, is that this villain is very despicable at the start. You think, oh, I want to see this guy die in the worst possible way, but then the movie gives you a little bit of insight into this villain, and a guy that was demonized, you're starting to get a little bit of human quality in him. So you feel, okay, I'm a little bit compassionate for this guy. I feel that he's a victim of his circumstances, and that all of a sudden when this main character is contemplating exacting his revenge on this main villain, you think to yourself, okay, I really don't want to see anyone die here, because I just think this is a tragedy, is that these people are being raised in a poor community, they've got no other option in order to support each other. So you feel, okay, because the director has made a complex sort of character within its villain, it gives you a certain sense of discomfort, is that the satisfaction to this revenge film is not there. So it avoids all stereotypes, and that's what I liked about The Guvnors the most. You've also got great cinematography. There was a fairly decent soundtrack. There were very good scenes of violence, especially right at the end. I thought right at the end was very reminiscent of films such as The Wanderers from the 1970s. Although it's not quite as good as The Wanderers, I still thought it had that sort of quality where it's done on a very epic level, and it's just very realistic as well. So there is no torture porn in this film, which is something I was very thankful for. It's what surprised me the most, and in the end it's the reason why I would recommend The Guvnors to people who like your revenge films, but done with a complex sort of nature in order to make you feel as though it's something that is memorable and at the same time very thought-provoking. So overall for The Guvnors, going to give it 3.5 stars. Go out there and see it. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Next, thank you for watching movies, and I'll see you later.